Hi, everyone. It's Natalie Bencavanga, and welcome to Facts Over Fear, the IVF edition, because there's a lot to talk about today, you guys. We hear a lot of rhetoric from the current administration about what they are involved with, and in particular, this sort of pro-family agenda. And Trump has said time and again that he is pro-IVF, but why are fertility experts sounding the alarm on that? Because President Trump says repeatedly since he has been reelected that he supports IVF and has even promised to make fertility treatments more affordable for the average American family. But many reproductive health advocates say there is a growing disconnect between the administration's messaging and the policies taking shape behind the curtains. And we've seen this kind of across sector. So this isn't actually new in how they seem to be moving. And while the White House talks about expanding access to IVF, critics are pointing to cuts in reproductive health research, changes to federal oversight, reduction in services that are supported by Medicaid and Medicare, and of course, the growing influence of fetal personhood laws. We're going to learn a little bit more about what that is if you don't know. That could actually fundamentally change how IVF is practiced here in the United States, and that could depend on which state you live in. So, what's political rhetoric? What's actual policy? And what's actually at stake for millions of Americans who rely on fertility treatments or who maybe want to explore those options to help build their families? Today, we are going to be celebrating. I wish we were Freudian slip there, you guys. I'm in a good headspace, okay? Today, because I'm with my girl here. Today, we're separating the facts from the fear with my friend and fertility advocate, Callie Myram. She is the founder and CEO of Lotus Fertility Insurance, and we're going to talk all about that here in a moment. Callie, thank you so much for joining me. It is a celebration together.
It is interesting because if we are, tackling the most important and complex issues in front of us, we have to have this bold optimism. And so I think having a positive lens on these really tough issues, I think is really important. So it was a funny Freudian slip, but we are certainly not celebrating really what's at stake. So
no, we are not.
No, it's really nice to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Oh my God, anytime. We are celebrating what is possible because
yes.
You are on the forefront of this industry, and we're going to talk about that from an insurance perspective. But before we do that, we do have to put a critical lens on what the Trump administration is currently doing that really could hamper people's ability to start a family utilizing IVF. Because like I said at the top of the show, he has been very public with his support around the idea of IVF, even saying during the campaign that treatment should be covered, right? But advocates are saying that his actions tell a much more complicated story. So before we get into the Trump administration's position, for people that may just not know that much about IVF in and of itself, can you just give us a quick breakdown of what it is? What do you mean when you're saying IVF for people that may not know?
In vitro fertilization is become a medical necessity for millions of people around the world who wish to build a family and need fertility treatments in order to do it. It's been around for about 40 years or so. And so we've had millions of babies born as a result of this. It is prohibitively expensive, especially in the US, as health insurance largely does not cover it. We are seeing positive trends in that direction, but 1 in 6 people struggle with infertility and need fertility treatments in order to build a family. So for millions of people, treatments like IVF are really important in order to achieve their dreams of building a family. And I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to get into the medical pieces, but
that was a chef's kiss, perfect overview, just to give everybody that quick rundown at the high level, so we're all on the same page as we start this. But you got me thinking about something when you said 1 in 6 people, and I wonder, seeing so much that's going on with how the Trump administration is rolling back environmental protections, and we're seeing fertility rates decreasing across the world. once again, connecting those dots between the environment, plastics, all the things that impact the human body, IVF may become even more necessary as we move forward in this sort of wild west of where we're heading as more and more regulations are pulled away from our community health. And so this topic to me, regardless of if you are planning a family right now or thinking about it in the future, my God, it couldn't be any more relevant or
Yeah.
timely. So when we're looking at how Trump has repeatedly described himself as a supporter of IVF, and you and I have had many text exchanges about this, what has the administration actually done? Because at the end of the day, as you know, words don't mean much unless there's actual action and policy to support it behind it.
Yeah. I think in this case, actions and policy are directly contradicting each other, or what
Mhm.
words and action are directly contradicting each other. Because I think if you only read the headlines, you would think that they've solved the problem. For example, the administration recently issued an executive order and essentially a proposed rule which would create a new limited accepted benefit, which is a pathway for employers to be able to offer fertility coverage.
Mhm.
They've also launched Trump RX, which is a discount program for a few specific IVF medications. But the reality check here, Natalie, is that while they are handing out these voluntary options and discount codes with one hand, they are actively dismantling the scientific and regulatory infrastructure of reproductive health with the other. So you cannot really claim to be the IVF president while simultaneously pausing federal grants for women's health and firing the CDC teams that keep IVF safe and transparent. So the
Mhm.
rhetoric
Wow.
really simply just does not match the wrecking ball that they are taking to the broader reproductive healthcare system.
No, I really appreciate your candor on that.
Mhm.
So when we've looked at some of these things that you're talking about, this dismantling, how does all of this sort of fit in to the larger scope of how this administration is viewing the idea of reproductive rights and justice? Because, like you said, on the one hand, they're offering up a few things, but in the reality, it seems like there's actually more restriction.
Yeah, and I think this is where you're really starting to see a lot of fragmentation on this issue in the Republican Party. I think Trump is going to do whatever is the most popular thing. It is a very popular belief on both sides that IVF is a necessary medical treatment for you, whether or not you're a Republican or a Democrat. But there is a minority, a very powerful minority that it has the president's ear, and is kind of embedded into the inner workings of a policy that has been actively trying to dismantle this for over 50 years. So you see, there are a lot of Republicans who need this, and at the same time, you see, like the Baptists in the U.S. Come out and oppose IVF, and this largely has to do because the anti-abortion movement and the IVF movement, or the abolitionist approach towards abortion and other reproductive health autonomy is directly impacting how IVF is treated and managed today. Because the two have, the two unfortunately, or
Mhm.
fortunately, whatever you want to say, have repercussions
I mean,
on
that
it.
it's like two sides of the same coin, and perhaps it's the reason why religious dogma shouldn't be taking the place of
Mm,
our secular law system, because exactly this, people might have differing feelings on a lot of issues that are very personal, and in this case, it can really upset the apple cart and prevent progress from happening. So one issue that's received far less attention is what's happening to reproductive health research and oversight. And I want to go back, we'll go back to the connection between
mhm,
IVF and abortion here in
mhm,
a moment. But I think the research arm of this, Callie, is really terrifying to me because
mhm.
I'll tell you, today I was online and I just saw an, another video of another thing to panic about, but they're trying to cut Medicare coverage for breast cancer screenings. And it would then cause you to have to pay $5,000 to know if you are targeted for, this particular tumor, if you're going to end up with cancer or not. And I just keep thinking to myself, you can't say you're going to make America healthy again and keep cutting all of this preventative care. So when we're looking at women's health
Hmm.
research, obviously IVF is a big
Hmm.
part of that care. Why are advocates concerned about these massive cuts that we're seeing and the changes to the CDC's fertility surveillance programs?
Yeah. I think advocates are terrified because the administration is gutting the science that makes IVF safe.
Mm,
They abruptly paused non-individual federal grants for women's and reproductive health, and even worse, they also engaged in mass firings at the CDC, which specifically eliminated the team that's responsible for the National ART surveillance system. ART stands for Artificial Reproductive Technology. So this is the exact program that was mandated by a law that came about in 1992, that mandated that to collect data from
hmm
fertility clinics so that we know their success rates. So, pushing to expand access while simultaneously blinding the public to clinical safety and defunding reproductive science is dangerous hypocrisy. And, like you said earlier, kind of puts people back into this kind of wild, wild west of figuring out for themselves what are the most safe and effective paths for building a family.
I think that's really scary because, if I didn't know you, I wouldn't know a lot of what's going on because you and I have
Mm,
had so many important conversations over the last several months. We've engaged in work together to help amplify what you're doing because what I think what you're doing is so vital and important and inextricably attached to the idea of autonomous control over one's
thank
life
you.
and future. And so when you set out to disrupt this industry. What was the impetus for that? And does it make you nervous about the product that you want to bring to market, how that's going to be received and implemented in reality?
Yeah, great question. I think my research into this question about why I couldn't buy individual fertility insurance really uncovered for me how fundamentally flawed
Mm,
fertility care is treated today. And the healthcare system is reactive. So people are receiving care after a problem arises. And on the other side of that, the system benefits by keeping it that way. It's more profitable for providers and for clinics to keep people in the costliest part of the fertility journey because prevention is not lucrative. Prevention is not profitable.
mm,
So in looking at that, I was like, well, you can't really solve a problem with the same system that created it. And seeing also, since I started my research and into this journey of building Lotus, after I committed, that I'm going to do this thing, this is my life's work. Roe v. Wade was overturned, and
mm,
so there have been all of these, as an example of all of the attacks against reproductive health. So you see how the healthcare system is. It is repeatedly at risk of not being able to care for people the way that they deserve care. So, what is healthcare and who is deserving of it? Like I was saying earlier, these really powerful ideologies, these powerful but unpopular ideologies, are based in deep religious conviction and belief. And so seeing that influence on the healthcare system was like kind of reading the tea leaves for me to be like, we're not building this within a healthcare product, which is why I'm building this as a financial product. So Lotus
mhm.
is making it possible for people to be able to pay for fertility treatments that health insurance doesn't cover with their life insurance policy. So it's regulated outside of a healthcare product because it's the financial sterility and the operational bottlenecks that we're solving for. So it doesn't mean it like totally. It still makes me worried about how the dismantling of reproductive health and policy and laws is affecting all of us, but my product design is very strategic, based on what I'm seeing.
You guys, Trump's playing checkers, but Callie over here, she's playing chess, okay? And
That's funny.
checkmate, honey, checkmate. If you're just joining us, I'm chatting with my friend, Callie Myram. She is the founder and CEO of Lotus Fertility Insurance. Before we move further into this connection between the abortion and reproductive justice space, fetal
Mhm.
personhood, how that all kind of
Mhm.
connects back, like we were saying, I just want to for people, I just want to illuminate this for people that may just still be not as familiar. You were talking about the data and the transparency of collection of
Mhm.
all of this information around these fertility clinics. So some people may be like, well, what's the big deal? Like, why is that data collection so important in this industry? So in your mind's eye, with the work that you've done, all of the people that you've now surrounded yourself with that are experts in this space, how does tracking that IVF, those
Mhm.
outcomes, help protect patients and improve care?
Yeah, really tracking outcomes is really one of the strongest and maybe only ways that patients can make informed decisions during an incredibly vulnerable and expensive time. Uh, Data collection ensures that clinics aren't artificially inflating their success rates or engaging in deceptive advertising. So by tracking their data, we learned how to reduce the risks of, multiple fetus pregnancies and optimize care. That team that I was mentioning, that national ARC
Mhm.
surveillance team was a team of 6 or 7 people. That was really their job. And they illuminated a lot of, these important gaps or issues that has made IVF safer over the years. Without government oversight and tracking, we're throwing again patients back into this wild west and forcing them to spend tens of thousands of dollars completely blind to the clinic's actual safety and efficacy
Wow.
records. So this type of stuff is really important to stay on top of and improve and track.
Callie, before we move on, you got me thinking about an article I'd seen the other day, and I was like, "Ooh, I want to get your thoughts on this," because this woman had written a piece, and I can't remember for which publication, but it was basically like she had spent about $250,000 on
Mm,
fertility treatments, and she still did not end up with a baby at the end of it. They just didn't work, and I've had friends that have had to go a different route in order to create a family because after even painstaking, efforts and attempts with IVF treatments, it just didn't work. Can you
mm,
talk again why this journey is so intimidating for people? Because it is so cost prohibitive and it is not this silver bullet to building that family. So can you talk about the need for
mhm.
insurance in this process?
Yeah. I mean, infertility is a disease,
Mhm.
and it is defined by the World Health Organization as a disease. But the system currently today treats it like a choice. Health insurance has
Wow.
traditionally seen IVF as not medically necessary. And so it's taken a lot of work to get health insurance to really change their tune and start seeing it differently. Um, it's what was the other part of your question?
No. Sorry, guys, we're going down rabbit holes today.
No,
So
it's
it's true though. No, this idea of like there's no guarantee here. So the
yes.
impact, the importance of then
Oh,
having these riders, because when I saw that six-figure
mhm,
amount and then she
mhm,
still didn't end up with a baby, I mean, that's so doubly devastating because there probably goes her life savings or there goes a loan that she probably took out at a high interest rate to do
yes,
this or leveraged against their house or I mean, who knows? But now at the end of that, there's nothing to show for it. I mean, how do you not have an insurance policy it's just sort of
yeah.
mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, and I think that on that piece too, her and probably her partner too,
Mhm.
right? And by zooming out and seeing this issue as not just a women's health issue, or showing how much men are affected by this too. Women and men are just as at risk of financial devastation due to the lack of fertility protection, due to the lack of coverage. And I I've never tried to build a family. I haven't, built a family yet. But when I talk to people who have gone through or are going through the experience, when you want something so bad, you'll do anything. You'll do anything to build the family of your dreams. And this isn't just, like an elective medical procedure. It is a human right to be able to build a family on your terms. And many people, are kind of up against this, what seems like a system that doesn't want to help them accomplish that. And people are left with the stress of navigating their own journey, and for many, needing to be their own advocates in doctors' offices and with insurance companies to be able to get the care they need and deserve. And people are willing to spend a lot of money in order to do that, and at the detriment of their life savings, at the detriment of future plans, down payment on a home, education, right? Like the options today are forego your life savings in order to build a family, or forego building a family in order to protect your life savings, or not. So it's the financial sterility piece that we're really solving for. And that's really the gap in the market today.
And I think that is a really important component to this that we don't talk a lot about, is how much money it costs to start a family and to raise a family. And if you remove that barrier to the starting point, that would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars that would have been put aside then for the child's education, for that home, for childcare, because we don't have that either. Like all of these other things that factor in when we're thinking about the real cost of family in this nation. And, I think what always scares me is how there's this constant tug of war on who is worthy of something and who isn't, who deserves something and who doesn't. And oftentimes it comes down to class and it comes down to financials. Anyone and everyone has the right, like you said, to have a family, to bring children into the world if they choose to do that. And I think that's really the key here. It's about choice, which lends itself to the segue into the second part of this conversation, because, we're talking about IVF and the Trump administration's rhetoric around it, which is like, yeah, rah, rah, we're great with it. But at the same time, the policies don't back that energy up. And also there's a growing push for fetal personhood laws. And this is happening across the nation, and what this actually means for fertility care. Now, can you explain for everyone, and once again, we know you're not a doctor, but just from your own perspective working in this area, what does fetal personhood mean in practical terms, and why is this becoming such a boiling issue here with IVF?
Yeah. I can speak to it, not as a doctor even, because this isn't like a medical thing to begin with, Fetal personhood, for those that don't know, is...
Touche!
is
Even I'm getting sucked into this nonsense.
No, but it's a great, it's we go there. Like I've been heated all afternoon. I'm like, I'm so ready for this conversation.
I love it.
Oh, fetal personhood is the legal concept that grants an embryo the exact same constitutional rights and protections as a living, breathing human being from the very moment of fertilization. It's a massive legal issue for IVF because the IVF process inherently involves creating multiple embryos to ensure a successful pregnancy. So if an embryo is legally a person, then standard IVF practices become fraught with this risk of civil liability, wrongful death lawsuits, or even murder charges. It creates this impossible legal minefield for both doctors and patients. So it's really dangerous.
It is really dangerous, and it's also completely biased towards a certain set of ideological, dogma and framework, which we touched on a little bit earlier. And many people don't really understand or realize that IVF involves, like you said, freezing embryos, freezing eggs, genetic testing, decisions about what will happen to unused embryos. Because let's think about this. For example, somebody goes in for a treatment and they're able to make 6 embryos. And then they narrow that down. Maybe 4 of those are what they would maybe say viable. And then they have to figure out, because we've learned, I'm watching the Octomom documentary right now. You can't impregnate someone with as many embryos perhaps as you could 20 years ago, because there's all kinds of issues there too. So maybe they do 1 or 2 of them. Well, how do they decide which choose, or what happens to the rest? So can you talk about how all of these personhood laws could really undermine the medical practices, and could clinics even be forced to shut down?
Yes, it not only undermines them, it would paralyze them.
Wow.
In standard IVF, you test embryos for fatal genetic anomalies, and you discard the embryos that are not viable, like you said, or are no longer needed. So, under personhood laws, discarding an embryo is legally equivalent to homicide, which means clinics will be forced to indefinitely preserve every single embryo ever created, effectively harvesting them in a frozen stasis forever, because they are terrified of the legal and financial liabilities of destroying them. So it would really make routine genetic testing perilous, and drive the cost of endless storage into the stratosphere. So, but
And
yeah, you're right. Many people don't realize that standard IVF often involves
yeah.
freezing embryos
Yeah,
and
and
genetic
also,
testing.
yeah, and I
Mhm.
was just going to piggyback off of that about the genetic testing component. I mean, this can also impact other things that are utilized from that genetic testing, other things that we learn, other scientific
Mhm.
research that ends up growing out of understanding, these embryos at this phase. So much more can be lost too when we're
Mhm.
talking about what happens when we don't let scientists under, like you said, supervised, regulated spaces that are ethically sound, do the work that can be done to then support people in having, if they choose to, a family. So when we think of that link between fetal personhood, IVF, and then we think of how it links to reproductive rights, where is that crossover?
Fetal personhood and reproductive rights. Well, it's we really see it in the abolitionist movement that wants
Mhm.
to eliminate abortion for any case whatsoever, in any instance, even an ectopic pregnancy, which is going to result in either a medically necessary abortion, or the embryo dies and the woman potentially dies. So I think, like, IVF and fertility and building a family aside, like, women will die as a result of these really strict laws that are not based on science. They're not based on protecting life. They are based on uh, f- you know extreme religious belief and conviction about when life starts.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of people think that they're protecting protecting life, while it's actually making care much harder, and it's making it less safe for people.
Callie, I've been rewatching Shaws of Sunset on Bravo,
Mm.
and there's an episode that just happened. I'm rewatching the whole series, and Gigi Golnessa, who is one of the main players on this reality show, she was very open about her IVF journey throughout the entire, I would say, last 3 seasons of the show. She ends up deciding, as a single woman, she wants to have a baby on her own. She goes to the sperm bank, freezes some embryos, and ends up with an ectopic pregnancy. And they
Mm.
actually had to remove her fallopian tubes, and she almost died. She ends up getting inseminated again, and it does take the next time, and she is able to go on and have a beautiful baby boy. And to your point, what I find really fascinating is, under a lot of the new laws here in the United States, there is a chance that someone in Golnessa's condition with that ectopic pregnancy that was stuck in her fallopian tube would have just died
Mhm.
and never have been able to live the life of mother, which is what she wanted for herself, and would have never gone on to have a family. And I think these are the conversations that we're not having right now as much in public because there is this sort of growing fear and stigmatization around talking about people's fertility journeys or their decision not to have a child. And oddly enough, she was also very open about terminating pregnancies in her 20s when she wasn't ready to be a mother, and how just intricately entwined all of this comes down to, which really is about just bodily autonomy. So
Hmm.
when you're thinking of this bigger picture and you're thinking of your work in the insurance space as the founder and CEO of Lotus Fertility Insurance, why is this, the work that you're doing, so important as it relates back to bodily autonomy?
Oh, yes, because I don't trust that the healthcare system and the administration that is dismantling laws and policies is actually going to be protecting it
Yeah.
at the end of the day. And so we have to build it in a way that allows people to have that autonomy. My journey to starting Lotus was really when I was looking into freezing my eggs in my early 20s, and my employer at the time didn't have a benefit. My health insurance wasn't covering a lot of out-of-pocket expenses that I had regarding my own endometriosis diagnosis journey. And
Mhm.
so in addition to the health perspective, I really started looking at my future ability to build a family through a financial lens.
Mm.
Hence why I went to the individual insurance market to see, is there a gap insurance or a supplemental insurance that can help cover this, right? Like critical illness, or you have cancer policies, these supplemental health policies, and they didn't exist. In fact, of all the types of supplemental insurances, like pregnancy and fertility always seem to be the exception. And
Wow.
so, yeah, and so the only solutions that really existed were in the employer market. And so I'm like, okay, so my only option here is that I have to go work at Amazon or I have to go work at Meta in order to
Mm.
these types of Cadillac, fertility benefits. It's just not where my career trajectory was going or where I wanted it to go. And that's not autonomy. That's not choice. You hear more people talking about how they stay in jobs that they hate in
Yeah.
order to hang on to the benefits for the time when they know that they need them. And that's not autonomy. That's not real choice.
Mm.
So having an individually owned insurance product is really giving people that's not tied to your employer, gives people the ability to pursue their career, pursue whatever dreams that they have in their life without having to think, how am I going to pay for this if I end up needing it one day?
I so appreciate everything that you shared today, Callie. I know we could go on and on for a
Mm-hmm.
lot longer because there are so many
Uh-huh.
more things to touch on, but I know you're going to be back. I want to leave everyone with this thought. I saw this video on Instagram the other day, and I don't know who it was, so I can't give them credit, but it doesn't come from me. But it was a guy, and he said, "Imagine if um, babies came from a portal, not inside a person, but like a door, like a doorway.
Hmm.
People would leave gifts at the portal. People would create religion at the portal. People would leave food and they'd pray and there'd be celebrations and rituals and begging for the babies to come through, and then there would be joy every time. Like there would be so much, and it's like we are the portal and we are
Literally.
begging for scraps at this table. And so I want to reaffirm the impact that a product like this can have to realign the balance, because we've become completely out of balance as it pertains to taking care of the people who literally bring the new people into this space. So,
Well
Callie,
said.
if people want to learn more about the work that you're doing or where they can follow you, where can they go?
You can follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn at Callie Myram. Our website, fertilityprotect.com, has a lot of great information for consumers. And we also have a fertility protection gap calculator so you can see how much your financial exposure might be if health insurance doesn't cover what it is that you need. And you can also kind of see where your state tracks on, these certain laws that are coming out. Because since Roe v. Wade was overturned, it's back at the state level. So we monitor these types of things at the state level. So you can follow me on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and you can find Lotus Fertility Insurance on both of those platforms as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Callie. And if you want to subscribe to Facts Over Fear, please do so up above. And until next time, everyone, as always, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Anytime. Bye.